Hey there. I don't know where to start with this story because it's all so ridiculous and I'm still trying to process it myself. So forgive me if I start rambling or don't make sense in the middle. I, a 26-year-old woman, have been married to my husband, a 32-year-old man, for a year. We dated for 2 years before getting married, and things were normal and nice while we were dating, so I had no idea what was to come. My husband has been married before. He was married to his college girlfriend for 3 years, but they got divorced 7 years ago. I've never met his ex-wife, and neither did he talk much about her while we were dating. He'd only told me that they were not on good terms and that he didn't want to see her ever again. That's all I knew about their divorce, and he wouldn't tell me any more, even if I asked. My husband and I had been happily married for the most part and were even trying to have a baby. We decided to have a baby a couple of months ago, but we were struggling to conceive, and the more we struggled, the worse his behavior became. I already felt awful and frustrated because I wasn't able to conceive, and instead of comforting me and consoling me, he decided to add on to my problems. He wouldn't talk to me for days after every negative pregnancy test and would make me feel guilty as if it was my fault only. He'd also picked up a new habit of constantly comparing me to his ex-wife, despite his supposed hatred towards her. Everything that she used to do was perfect, and I was just not good enough. I started to get really sick of the comparisons with this woman whom I'd never even met, and eventually decided that I was done. I didn't want to be married to a man who didn't value me for who I am and wanted me to be like someone else. He'd even said to me that he wished I'd be more like her, so it wasn't as if I was imagining it. I didn't want to have a baby with him either because, in my honest opinion, he wasn't fit to be a father. Not right now, at least. He wasn't even being a good husband to me, so there was no way he was ready to become a father. But I was also feeling really petty because that's how hard he'd pushed me, so I decided to find his ex-wife and get her to join in and get our revenge against him. I'm sure that even in their divorce, it must have been his fault and not hers, which turned out to be true once I spoke to her. We met a couple of days back after we'd spoken on the phone. It wasn't hard to find her online since, and once I sent her a message, she agreed to meet me readily. I ended up ranting to her about all the problems that I'd been facing in my marriage because I'd been hiding it from everyone and I just wanted to let it out now. So I told her everything, especially about the way he would constantly compare me to her, even though he said he hated her. Shockingly, she told me that same thing had happened to her as well when they were married and was struggling to conceive as well. He used to constantly compare her to his ex-girlfriend and would make her feel like total crap. He kept pushing her and she finally filed for divorce because she just couldn't take it anymore. We were both shocked at the pattern and could tell that something was really fishy with him. One thing was for sure, he was the one who had problems with fertility and not us. His ex-wife had even told me that she'd secretly gotten tested while they were trying and had found that she was perfectly fine. When she tried to inform him about it, he got very upset and they got into a huge fight. He still insisted that the tests were all wrong and she was the one who had a problem. 1 week later, she'd filed for divorce and that was that. I knew that this time as well, it would not have been me who was struggling with fertility. I haven't gone for a test yet, but I just knew that it was him and not me. It wouldn't have mattered to me if he'd just been normal about it, but instead, he tried to make me feel guilty and had even succeeded because I'd felt horrible about myself every time I failed to conceive. I was so angry at whatever he was trying to do that I decided to teach him a lesson with his ex-wife. Both of us had been through hell because of this absurd, crappy behavior, and he was not going to get away with it this time. He deserved to be taught a lesson so that he wouldn't do this to the next woman he was involved with. So we decided that we'd mess with him and have a grand entry for my husband's new wife, and it'd just be his ex-wife in her wedding dress coming through the door. If he wanted me to be like her, then I would surely go the extra mile for him and get him back the real thing. That was the basic idea behind our plan. It was very dramatic and petty, so it felt like the perfect end to our marriage because I guess that's what he wanted. Dramatic and petty. This was all his ex-wife's idea, and I was totally on board with it. I also decided to call her over for dinner a couple of nights ago because I wanted to talk to her in detail about her divorce and prepare myself mentally for my own. I knew that my husband would be out of town for the week because he told me several times about it already, so the coast would be clear as well. So she came over for dinner and I was just about to serve her dessert when I heard a car pull up in the driveway. I was kind of confused since my husband wasn't supposed to come back home that day. He was supposed to leave for the airport from his office. His ex-wife also started looking really alarmed when she heard it and asked me if I was sure that it wasn't him. I wasn't sure, and I told her that, and she literally bolted. I'm not even kidding. She was out the back door of our house within minutes and didn't even bother to explain. A split second after she'd left, my husband entered the house and he immediately asked me about the car parked out there. He said it reminded him a lot of his ex-wife's car, and his face had gone white while saying it, so I was forced to lie about it. I told him that it wasn't hers for sure, and someone else must have parked their car out front accidentally. He didn't seem satisfied with that explanation, went back out to check, but by then his ex-wife had driven away. So he came back in and told me that his ex-wife would have some real guts if she'd actually decided to show up here in spite of the restraining order. And suddenly it all clicked. I remembered one instance 6 months into our relationship where he told me that he got a restraining order against his ex-wife just a few years after his divorce had been finalized. He told me that they'd met at a party and she'd approached him to apologize, but he'd refused to speak to her. So in a fit of anger, she smashed a bottle of champagne on his head, and he had to get several stitches because of that incident. This had been a few months before he met me, and I felt like a total idiot because I'd forgotten about it entirely. To be fair, he'd only ever mentioned it once and then never again, so I can't really say that it was my fault entirely for forgetting. I didn't know what exactly to tell him afterward because I knew that I had to grit my teeth and just lie my way out of this because legal trouble was the last thing I needed on my plate at the moment. So I somehow managed to convince my husband that it wasn't his ex-wife and just some random car that had been parked out there. He still wanted to call the cops and make sure that she wasn't in the area at all, but I managed to calm him down somehow to prevent that from happening. It's been a few days since then, and I've obviously blocked his ex-wife everywhere. I feel really guilty about what happened because I just wanted to mess with him a little and make him feel bad for the way he'd been acting with me before I left. But I didn't actually intend on putting him in harm's way. I also felt very suspicious of whatever his ex-wife had told me the day we'd met, and don't know if she's trustworthy enough or not. For all I know, she might have been lying the entire time just so she could get back at my husband for whatever reason. And I'm pretty sure her intentions weren't any good either, because if she was willing to risk violating a restraining order just to humiliate my husband, then there's something wrong with her, which is why I've blocked her. I want nothing to do with her anymore. She seems really psychotic. About the divorce, though, I still want to go through with it because I just don't think my husband and I are a good match anymore. He's not the kind of man I believed I was marrying, and regardless of what I'd done, I still don't think it excuses what he's been doing and the way he's been acting. I'm just very confused about everything. Why does my husband keep comparing me to the ex-wife that he has a restraining order against? And why did she agree to be part of my plan in spite of the risk that she was taking? She could actually go to jail if we'd gone through with our plan, and she knew it. I'm just so lost right now. I have no idea whom to talk to because nobody has any idea what's going on with me right now. I've been a total mess these past couple of days, and my husband's been no help either. He hasn't been comparing me to his ex-wife lately, but he's also become really paranoid and snippy with me. Of course, I take the blame for all of it, and I know it's my fault for getting his ex-wife involved in the first place. I just don't know what to do now. I desperately want to come clean to my husband and tell him that it actually was his ex-wife that day because I've been gaslighting him into believing otherwise the entire time, and the guilt of that is driving me crazy. I also still want a divorce, and I don't know when to bring that up either. Also, I'm pretty sure that confessing to him about his ex-wife's involvement isn't going to end well for me either. I'm so confused. I have no idea what to do right now. I feel like I'm trapped in this marriage now and have to stay with this man and treat him well to make up for what I'm doing. I know he recognized the car instantly and still isn't fully convinced. AITA for gaslighting my husband into believing that it wasn't actually his ex-wife's car that he saw parked outside our house when I know for a fact that it was. Update 1. Some context. My husband and his ex-wife did not have a contested divorce. My husband took the house and his ex-wife received a huge sum of money and their car in the settlement. So in my opinion, it was pretty equal. I don't think she was cheated out of anything, which is why she's so desperate for revenge, like a lot of people have been suggesting. My husband had always maintained that he didn't like his ex-wife, but had brought up the restraining order only once so far, which is why it had completely slipped my mind. It was an honest mistake, and I really am sorry about it, but that being said, it could have happened to anyone. I know my plan of getting revenge on him was a petty and stupid one, but you guys have no idea how bad it's been for me. This is what my husband does. He pushes and he pushes people until they finally snap. I don't mean to blame the victim, but this is probably also what he did with his ex-wife, and she finally snapped and filed for divorce. I'm not talking about the bottle smashing incident. That's inexcusable, and under no circumstances would I ever condone violence of that degree. But yeah, the divorce was pretty much his own fault. I don't think his ex-wife had been lying about that because I've even spoken to a few of his friends, and they do remember him talking a lot about his ex, even when he was married to his ex-wife. I guess he's always been this way. Maybe it's his coping mechanism or something. I'm not sure. I don't know why he does it, but I'm sure it has something to do with his inability to have a child. Maybe he himself feels like crap because he definitely has fertility issues, so he starts gaslighting and manipulating whoever he's with to make them feel like they're the problem. This is just me theorizing, and I'm not saying that this is what's been happening. But I can't see any other possible explanation as to why he's been doing this to me. Also, no, I haven't been able to find out why exactly his ex-wife wanted to talk to him at the party. I've been talking to a lot of his friends behind his back, and it's been really risky, but they've been kind enough to keep their mouths shut about all of it. I've been telling them that he's been having some anxiety problems, which is why I want to know all that I can, and they've been buying it. So they're telling me things that he wouldn't admit himself. But none of them seem to know why exactly that incident at the party had taken place. So I'm drawing a blank there. I feel horrible about all of this, but I really have no choice. I still want the divorce, so I haven't told my husband about his ex-wife's visit and her involvement yet, because I don't want him to be able to use that against me in the divorce proceedings. He's still really anxious, but he's also back to his usual comparisons about how his ex-wife was so much better before she went psycho. I've been speaking to a lawyer who happens to be a family friend, and I've told her the whole truth. She says it's tricky to keep lying, but I've dug myself into a hole and have no option but to keep going now, because if this does come up in the divorce, I'll definitely have a lot to lose. I feel like I'm being too selfish right now, but I'm just doing all it takes to keep myself out of trouble. Yes, I made a mistake, and yes, I do feel bad about it, but I also don't think I'm the villain here like a lot of you guys are making it out to be. I mean, come on. Just because I got his ex-wife involved by accident, not even on purpose, people can't just excuse whatever he'd been putting me through. We've dropped the whole baby thing, but despite that, he's continued to put me down and compare me to his ex-wife and been the worst husband to ever exist. I'm going to file for divorce in a few days, and I think I'll tell him about it tonight so that he isn't blindsided. But to be honest, I think he wants a divorce as well and is just too afraid to say it. I still don't have a lot of the answers, but I can't wait around any longer playing detective. I have a life to live, and I don't want to waste any more of my time with a man who I no longer love and who definitely doesn't love me. If he did, he wouldn't be treating me this way. I know he's trying to make the relationship so toxic that I'll end up leaving, which is what he did with his ex-wife, and that worked. And it's working this time as well because I'm done with him and this marriage. I know I made a huge mistake by getting his ex-wife involved and then lying about it as well, but I can't just stay in this marriage out of guilt. This isn't working out for me anymore, and I'm sure he feels the same way, so the best way forward for us is to separate. So I'm doing it. Update 2. My husband's ex-wife texted me a few hours back from a new number and explained a lot of things that I didn't know. And I'm literally dumbstruck right now. I'm trying to type it all out to make sense of what I've just learned and help myself process what she's told me. She apologized for not reminding me about the restraining order and said that she'd been truthful about everything else, which I already knew. She explained that she just hated him a lot and wanted a chance to mess with him and teach him a lesson. She'd been counting on me to erase any evidence of her being around him so he couldn't report her to the police, either which she now realizes was a stupid and reckless move on her part and could have put me in a bad situation as well during the divorce. She apologized to me several times throughout her text, so I guess I forgave her for being so dumb and reckless. Coming to the more important part, she explained to me the real reason he ended up getting a restraining order against her and what led to it. She'd visited their old house a few weeks before the party to look for some old documents that she needed and had accidentally left behind. My husband didn't have a problem and agreed to let her look. But while looking for it, she found the results of a fertility test that he'd taken while they were married, but had never told her. She realized that he was infertile and decided to confront him about it that very second. When she asked him about it, he told her that the test was wrong, but he looked pretty valid to her. She was furious because all along he'd made her believe that she was the problem. They got into a huge fight, and she ended up demanding that he tell her family that she wasn't the problem since they still blamed her and her supposed infertility for their divorce and not his actions. He refused and told her to get out, which she did, but only since she knew that they'd be meeting at that party a few days later anyway. At the party, she pulled him aside and confronted him about the whole thing again, and this time he decided to make a scene and yelled at her, saying that they weren't going to get back together no matter what she said, which obviously made some heads turn, and out of anger, she smashed that bottle on his head. She was sorry about it later on, and luckily she only got 3 months. After that, she hadn't been in touch with my husband, but her family still wouldn't speak to her and blamed her for the divorce, which is what drove her to this. She said that she hoped that I could forgive her for putting me in a tough spot, but to be honest, she's the last thing on my mind right now. I had suspected that my husband was the one struggling all along and had been refusing to get tested because he knew that it would just confirm what I already suspected. And this is definitely going to affect the divorce because we had discussed kids before getting married and he hadn't been transparent with me, even though he'd known that he would never be able to have children. I also understand now why he was so scared that his ex-wife might show up, because I'd find out the truth. My mind is reeling right now, and I just don't know what to make of anything right now. My husband and I have already agreed that we need to get a divorce. And he's going to be served with the papers tomorrow, but this changes everything. I know I lied to him as well, but it didn't cause him any harm. But what he did and the lies that he said have been screwing with my head for months until I just couldn't take it anymore. So a lot of people might call me a terrible person for this, but I'm not going to say anything about the whole situation with his ex-wife and take it to my grave. And I'm not even sorry. Update 3. It's been 3 weeks since the last update. I've been really busy with the divorce and my job, so I haven't been able to think of anything apart from that. My husband hasn't contested the divorce, so I'm grateful for that, but I have confronted him about the fact that he's the one who's infertile and not me, and we're struggling to come to a conclusion about how to settle. I don't want anything except for the house and the car, but for whatever reason, he believes that he's more entitled to the house than he is, even though we split the cost equally. I'm a little younger than him as well, and I don't earn as much as he does, so I think I deserve the house more than he does. But he's just not ready to settle on those terms. I don't care, though, because I know that I'll get through this somehow. I just feel awful that I'm going through this at all. I really did love him, and I did want to have a child with him as well, so to realize that this isn't going to happen has pretty much left me shattered emotionally. I don't know what's in store for me next, but I hope it's all for the best. The support some of you guys have shown me has been really helpful, and I'm thankful for that. Even though I haven't been the best version of myself lately, I hope I'm able to bounce back soon enough. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.